Friends, the weather outside is totally awful, so the best thing we can do is stay inside. But unfortunately I did the exact opposite, and now I'm sitting here kinda sick and my voice sounds pretty funny. What we're about to build tonight is a Panther that's been flipped over by a nearby bomb explosion, something that was a pretty common sight on the Western Front, so let's check it out.
The model and the resin zimmerit were sent to me as a gift by Modelbau König way back when I was just starting this channel. Since then, I collected some extra bling for it, and actually, they sent me 2 of these models, so another one will happen later down the line. Not to mention, I found some additional goodies for this build, which we'll see in just a moment. From what I understand, this is a rebranded Tacom Panther without the interior, a more budget-friendly option for someone who's not interested in the tank's internal organs. The hull is broken down into several armor plates, almost as on the real one, and that includes the interlocking joints, which is a very cool feature. Even during this stage, I already started prepping the model for some of my own improvements, such as removing the plastic weld beads in some places. But let's take a look at the belly of this beast. Normally, I don't pay any attention to the underside of my tanks. I mean, I don't even paint them. But on this model, it's gonna be the most exposed surface. In some reference images, these service hatches have been blown off. Well, the only and best method I know of is to brutally scrape and sand them off, but if there are bolts involved, it's smart to use them as a drilling guide beforehand for the bolt holes. I did a similar surgery on my pancake train earlier this year, but I had to use different methods there. Luckily, the interior detail shows the hole opening from the other side, and I used that as a cutting guide for my hobby blade. I'm sure it would be better to just drill them out, but massive drill bits are usually not a common part of scale modeler's toolbox. To finish this section off, I quickly textured the entire bottom plate with Tamiya putty diluted with Mr. Cement S, and once that was done, I could glue the lower and upper hulls together. Here we can see that I've already tried applying the resin zimmerit, but we'll talk about it a bit later. Let's now focus on the heavy metal techniques. I mean, the first one of these is the steel texturing with putty, which I've already shown you, and repeated on the other surfaces as well. The second part of this heavy metal lineup is the torch cutting method. I'm adding small cuts with a fresh hobby blade on each armor plate cross section. This is how it was done back in the day, and there usually wasn't time to machine these surfaces for a cleaner finish. The final metal technique is adding weld beads. I'm using the yellow Tamiya epoxy putty quick type, which is a 2-part putty, and after mixing it together, I rolled it into these thin ramen noodles. Even though most of these modern kits already have weld beads, and in some cases they're reproduced beautifully, there are usually some that are missing, and if I already have to add some of them, it's just more convenient to rework all of them. At the very least, the effect is gonna look consistent across the entire model. Also, the real weld beads were often quite nasty and irregular, and there's no better way to capture that look than honest handiwork. I'm not just joking now, because handmade work often comes with these minute imperfections, and that's what's beautiful about it, and that's also exactly what we want with our weld beads. Okay, so the basic texture and detailing are out of the way now, and you might think it's as good time as any to focus on the zimmerit, but actually, let's make the basic outline of the diorama. In this case, it's crucial to know the composition and how the finished model is gonna be presented, because it will determine which details will be visible. I made 2 circles on my styrofoam cutter, each 19 centimeters in diameter, and the second one will fall victim to my handheld hot wire. This way, it's much easier to keep the sides clean, and laminating will be much easier later. The entire story will revolve around a Panther that is in a large bomb crater, and because craters are circular, I thought the shape of the diorama would nicely add to the storytelling. We all know that PVA glue takes a while to dry and can get a little slippery, but we can hold it firmly in place by using toothpicks as nails. Just hammer those down and they'll hold the foam well enough until the glue finally cures. This screwdriver-looking adapter for the handheld cutter is great for adding more specific contours to the terrain, in this case a small indentation for the tank's turret. Now we have a basic structure of our scene and a much cleaner idea about how the model is gonna be presented. The busted running gear is gonna be one of the main features of this model, and we all know that the majority of the kit parts are contained here, so let's get it out of the way. Positioning pins are molded on the hull, and holes for them are also on the swing arms, but both will have to go. Superglue is the fastest and cleanest way of filling when you have enough room to sand these surfaces down, and a little bit of texturing goes a long way as well. Some of the swing arms will be exposed, so I drilled them out. There's a much more detailed 3D kit by T-Rex Studio available, but I tried to do my best with what I already had. Luckily, I won't have to clean up every single road wheel because only a fraction of them will remain on the tank. But painting will be much more difficult later because I can't superglue them together like I did on my Yak Panther, Tiger or the Yak Tiger. I also found these damaged wheels from Panther art in my stash, and they were an absolute blessing for this model. They require a bit of precise cleanup because of the casting blocks, but even then, any damage is more than welcome on these parts. In fact, in one of my reference images, the wheels are bent, which makes sense because they were forged steel in real life. Hot water makes resin soft for a while, so the task was super easy. However, they have no contact pins, so I just used a swing arm as a guide to glue them properly. Yeah, I think the tank looks much more interesting now, and we're only halfway there, because now we're assembling the tracks. These beautiful 3D printed, super detailed gigachats. I knew about 3D tracks for a long time, and I loved the technology, but I was always more inclined towards metal tracks because, well, you can't beat metal. But I don't know. My opinion changed at the start of the year when I assembled them for my Sherman, and those were one of the more complex tracks, yet the assembly was so pleasant. With that in mind, it should be no surprise that these were addictive to assemble, and I'm not exaggerating. Even when I wanted to take a break, I told myself, just one more link, and suddenly I had half of the track finished. The whole process is so clean and precise, and even though resin can be fragile, I didn't break a single pin, and I didn't even have to use tools, just my fingers. Now, of course, everything is dry fitted for easier painting, so the whole thing is flimsy AF, but even at this stage, the scene looks so cool and dynamic, right? Anyway, let's finally take a look at the zimmerit. We've all seen these resin sheets, and people usually like them. So here's my quick take before we look deeper. They're great for someone who doesn't feel like sculpting their own zimmerit from putty. But if you already know how to do that, it might be actually quicker to do it yourself. So what's the deal? After cutting them out of the sheet, you have to glue them to the model with superglue, and you have to nail the position very quickly because if you get it wrong, there's no way to remove the zimmerit without damage. Also, I don't know if this was just me, but most of these sheets didn't fit perfectly. They were either too big or too small, but usually too big, so I had to slice off the excess. Even though they are really, impressively thin, I still find them a little thick for this scale. Luckily, it's easy to integrate them into the surface by scraping away the material around the edges. You'll lose some of the texture and detail, but the pattern can be easily rescribed with a razor saw. Of course, this only works on this specific type of zimmerit. Then there's another thing. Making the edges where sheets meet each other seamless. People usually use two-part putty for this, so even with resin sheets you have to do a bit of sculpting yourself, but I simply use superglue. Again, it's easy to add the missing pattern with the razor saw. I had to glue the tool mounts on the sides because these determine the position of the sheets around them, but this is something I do even with handmade zimmerit. Again, most of the sheets didn't fit because they were too wide and tall. Some of it might have been my own mistake, but as I said, it's not such a big deal. I'd rather trim the excess zimmerit away compared to, I don't know, not having enough zimmerit, if you catch my drift. Adding it on the turret was way more fun, mainly because here we are just working with large smooth surfaces, and complex parts such as the mantlet or cupola are cast as entire pieces, not just sheets. So there we go, I think it looks mint, but again, with the amount of work and all the adjustments, scraping, scribing and whatnot, I'd probably have it done from putty in the same amount of time. But it was a nice change to try something new. Oh, and if you're eagle-eyed and noticed the barrel was too short, that's because a good chunk of it had to go. Let's now add the fine details, or at least those that will be visible. Instead of bending these tubes from photo edge like a real man, I drilled out the plastic ones. Actually, the rest of the Voyager photo edge is fairly simple, and every part can be easily bent with tweezers. Maybe it's because I'm not using all of it, just those things that are gonna be visible. In some cases, I made my life easier by using 3D printed details, such as this 3D extinguisher set from Heavy Hobby. I also found a set of Bosch headlights, so I quickly replaced the plastic one with this little beauty. Okay, I can hear your words of disapproval over the plastic tubes from earlier, so let me fix my reputation by soldering this large tube for gun cleaning rods using the original plastic part as a bending template. It's not gonna be very visible, yet at the same time, one of my references shows some serious damage on this part, and it would just be a wasted opportunity not to spend some extra time on it. Honestly, I did a much better job on this detail on my Yak Panther, so it would be worth checking out if you'd like to try making this part from scratch as well. The chains that secure the spare tracks are a very neat detail, and I know what you're thinking. If the tank is upside down, shouldn't these be just hanging loose? Well, yeah, but there are spare tracks hanging off the sides in reference images, and for those empty brackets, the chains will hang loosely just as they should. With the tank finished, it was time to work on the base. I used the melting attachment as before to add lots and lots of holes in the surface. This will provide a better grip for the mud paste, but it also helps to smoothen out the jagged edges on some of the pieces of styrofoam. By far, it's the most efficient method I've tried. Clean, quick, and provides tons of grip. The terrain paste is once again my favorite smart mud from VMS. It's super soft and lightweight, so adding track marks or any other imprints is very easy, and it's also great for sculpting more complex terrain features. And it's your lucky day, because you can get it as well at a discount price if you buy it directly from VMS or Michigan Toy Soldier, with links and coupons down in the description. Once that was done, I wrapped the base with paper and traced the contours onto it. This way, I'll be able to transfer them onto my favorite 0.6mm oak veneer. There are several ways of attaching it to the foam base. I like double-sided tape, a hot glue gun, and even PVA glue, which is what I used this time because I needed a strong bond, but also enough time to make adjustments and corrections. As such, I weighed it down with the glue joint pressed against my workbench and left it like that for several hours. Sadly, it was at this time I learned about some bad news. You see, my grandfather passed away as I was finishing the diorama. Normally, I wouldn't talk about it too much because this is a video about building models, but the thing is, he was born in 1939, and he used to tell me what he remembered from World War II. He was a small kid at the time, so he remembered just fragments, but he told me several times how he shook hands with Germans when they were marching east through his village, and then a few years later, he was shaking hands with Russians when they were marching west. He also said that they had a dugout of some kind in their garden, in case things got dangerous, but from what he recalled, there was no fighting in the area. The only thing was some kind of machine gun outpost on a nearby hill. And, when I lost him, I realized one thing about many others, but this one specifically is related to what we do here. You see, in a few years, there will be no surviving World War II veteran. And maybe 10 or 15 years after that, there will be no one who actually lived through this worst chapter of our modern history. And I believe it is our duty to make sure these people and their memories are never forgotten. Be it through studying our history, looking at old photos, listening to what veterans have to say, or just, visiting and talking with our grandparents because they're not gonna be here forever. Treating them in such a way that when they're gone, we won't have to carry regrets about what we did or didn't say or do while they were still around. And with that, I think it's about right to wrap this video up. I know the last part where I was working on the diorama was a bit rushed, but I was really forcing myself to finish it due to what happened, and I kept the filming very basic to say the least. But as you see, the groundwork itself is very simplistic, and I might or might not add more once the tank is painted, because for now I need the hull to be removable, otherwise there would be just no way to paint it properly. What's also curious is that I had something crazy planned for this diorama, but as I was working on it, I decided it would be best to keep it traditional, because the basic concept is pretty exciting already, and I'll keep that crazy part for another model, which I'll try to build very soon. So yeah, the next part is gonna be all about painting and finishing this scene, so keep an eye out for it. Before that, I want to sincerely thank you for watching these videos, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be building models for a living, and I can never thank you enough for it. All of this is also possible thanks to my incredible patrons. My whole Patreon page is like a Night Shift magazine subscription, because I post there pretty often, and you'll get updates from my workbench where I share my thoughts and insights. We can get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. I'm posting 1 week early ad-free videos, and those stay there forever so you can always get back to them. I also have some extra goodies such as 3D models, which you can use for detailing your projects, a bunch of real-life references for nature, old buildings and so on, and last but not least, these high-resolution studio photos which show the diorama in more detail than video ever could. It will help me a lot, but no pressure. Anyway, I'm terrible when it comes to time management and finishing things on time, but as I said, this is the last model from this year's bucket list, and it seems that I'll actually finish it in time. I'm already creating another list for next year, but who knows if we won't build something just for fun before that. Anyway, I'm gonna start painting this thing, and you stay safe, stay awesome, build your models, don't just collect them, and if you live near your grandparents or parents, go and visit them this weekend, or just, give them a call if you live further away. Cheers!